Hi, Deborah. Hi, Bob. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, Ethan.
Okay, well, I think we're all set to go. I know we don't have a chair, but I'm happy to call the meeting to order and announce that it's being recorded. And for roll call, I see I'm here, Ethan's here, and Bob is here. And land acknowledgement. Before we begin, we'd like to acknowledge the Chumash people who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Chumash elders, past, present, and future, who call this place Anaskoyo, the land that Isla sits upon, their home. We are proud to continue their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We thank the Chumash community for their stewardship and support, and we look forward to strengthening our ties as we continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding. Okay, and then I see there's an item for reordering the agenda. Maybe it would be good if we want to start out just by electing a chair. What do we think about that, committee?
That sounds good. I'm happy to help with that. I think Bob would do a good job. I think Spencer, you'd do a fine job. However we want to go about it this year.
I also think you'd do a great job, Ethan.
Okay. Thank you. Bob, are you good if I chair this year?
I'm good that I don't have to chair.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you for being our initial chair, and we'll take the training wheels off.
So, I think you did that a long time ago.
True.
Because you're doing great.
Thanks. So do we have a motion?
I'd move to elect Director Bertrand as chair of the Finance Committee.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion made, second. I don't see any public comment, so all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, no opposed, no abstentions. Thank you. So we'll now go into public comment period. At this time, any member of the public may speak on matters within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Finance Committee that are not on the agenda. The committee will not take action on any item not on the agenda except as provided by law. Again, not seeing any public comment, so we can get right into it with item 3.1, review of 2021 budget process timeline. Jonathan and Deborah.
Cool. Let me get my share screen on. Great. Hopefully my computer does not fall apart doing this. I was telling Jay earlier that Zoom apparently records your share screens and like made my computer slow to a crawl because of it. So I disabled that and deleted all the recordings. So should be, the last board meeting I think was horrendous in doing this. So we should be good today. So this is the timeline. We are not 100% on the timeline, but we're not too far off. A lot of things are, some things are ahead of timeline, like our estimated actuals are pretty much done. But some things are a little behind, like I haven't been able to do the analysis on the community programs area budget, which I plan to do this week. And we didn't have time for a surplus reserve at our last board meeting, and maybe not even the next, because the calendar is getting pretty packed. But we do need to make time for that. Otherwise, we're by the 31st, so we're ahead of that at least. We're gonna review projections. So we didn't get to do that yet. Since it's our first meeting, we're gonna really talk about what our priorities are, but we will be able to finalize our budget priorities questionnaire. So we have the old one, and we can review it, give direction, and we can update it and have it done by the end of the month to get going for April. So we're not too far off schedule. I think we had said budget town hall in mid-April. I don't think we're going to be able to make that. unless we, couple it with our board meeting at this point, or we can maybe push it out a little bit into, late April, might work better. But our interns are excited to work on it. They're able to start working on it next week. So we talked to them today, and they're not ready yet to help us doing the outreach for that and all that until next week. So I feel like that would be a little late. So there's just some little things to change. We're overall on track, but just wanted to, let you all know, be transparent that some things, this is just a draft. Obviously, this is our plan, but there's a lot of other things that have been thrown in the mix on our plate too, like the MSR questionnaire to be done in April is another just like factor that we're working on. That's just more things in the mix. So a little bit off track, but nothing fatal at all, and we can make adjustments to get back on track. So wanted to just discuss that with you.
Well, that sounds all good. As you explained it, I think I agree that we'll want to push back the budget town hall just to make sure we're able to have the information that we need to present at that, as well as get good community engagement. But other than that, I think whatever you have here already looks good.
Yeah, I think we're doing a lot of work we've done already, like in the past, like, we're used to some of this. That's good. And where does it say here? Oh, April 1 through 24, staff to work with partner agencies on budgets. That's something we're already doing. We met with the Ivy Beautiful folks today, and to just talk about their actual so far this year and where things are going. So these are, like I said, some things we're ahead of schedule, we're doing earlier than we planned, and some will be changing. So we're overall on track, just gonna need to make adjustments, but things are good. I don't think there's anything else to report on here. I don't know if you all want to discuss anything else, but that's it.
Bob, Spencer, do you guys have anything else on this part?
No, I think just meeting all the dates this year, I think will be kind of interesting. We're in the middle of looking at the salaries and the benefits, and if we can get that done and figure out what our approximate costs are, that's a big target. And then I don't have a lot of confidence that we'll really get what is going on with the county on the buildings, and when we'd be able to get occupancy, and what's going to happen with the homeless situation there. I mean, just my intuition is that's not going to end when Joan really wants it to, which is July 1st. I don't know what happened at the Thursday meeting with the Park District, but I had a tiny email discussion with Joan and Gina, and it sounds like a little bit that, even Joan's a little bit frustrated where this is going. And I assume it's probably politically for her, getting complaints from, the students' parents and that kind of stuff about the homeless situation. And so it'll just be kind of interesting to see where we go. And, Spencer and I are, Spence is digging hard on trying to figure out, the dissolution of the RDA, and figuring out what the revenue stream is back to the county, and why they can't put some more money towards fixing these buildings, which it becomes clearer and clearer that the buildings in their current state aren't ready for government operations, in my opinion. That they took those to be ready for government operations, and I just don't think they're ready for that. There's just so much stuff from that report we got. So I'm a little bit concerned there about how we do the budget in that area. I mean, like we were really, last year I had a good feeling that the county was going to bring more money to the table and we were going to put in some capital money, but the cost of the capital gets bigger and bigger. And so it's kind of how much we put in there without the county ponying up, which to me is their responsibility to get those buildings into shape. But I don't know. I just don't. It's just kind of interesting. That's just my comments. I think those two things, I think we can handle the salary piece, and we should really work on our salary piece and get that solid for our staff and everything. And then, I just don't see those buildings clearing up on the horizon anytime soon. But it is the county's budget time. So it is appropriate for us to get in there and, put in some written requests about what we think they should do to get those buildings in condition and transfer them to us.
Maybe I should add in a note here and where we might interject into that process as part of our process. So I'll put.
Okay.
Yeah, I do think that would be helpful, Jonathan. And with that in mind, I was just thinking that the sooner that we can nail down a date for the town hall, I think the better, because I agree, we definitely, if we need to push it back based on, what is written on this document now, to be more accommodating for the many other things we have going on, I think that's a good idea. And so that we can have something a little bit more solid to go for the community. But one thing that I'm thinking about too, I think we should be able to have our staffing numbers in the budget, pretty solid to figure it out by the time that we have that town hall, right? Or is there something else that
No, I think you're right there, Spence.
I think we're planned to have at least an initial board action on the 13th or the 27th, like within April. So
excellent. Then maybe it's in between the 27th and the 11th when we have our town hall.
Yeah,
that sounds good.
That could probably work in terms of assigning our interns the work on the 5th, and maybe having them get something out the week of the 19th to the 23rd would probably work. So I'll make that note now. 19th to 23rd. That's almost the mid-April, so it's not too far off.
Great. Well, I don't have anything else on the timeline other than that. Looks good.
Yeah, and I guess one question I have is, so I see our different services at different meetings. Are we at some point in this timeline going to have the planning side with like the STEP grant and the consultant that our board has discussed in the past for identifying the most pertinent planning issues in Isla Vista? Do we work that into this process at all?
Yes. So I think I maybe made this before we had that action, or might not have incorporated it fully. So we'll have the goal, at least, we might have gone sideways with the agreement again with the state, but the goal at least is to have the STEP grant for approval on the 13th, and then do like education for the board on like what this is and what it entails. That will definitely be something we'll need to incorporate into the budget, but I think, yeah, it'll be in the May or June period. Like it'll be further out. But just to let you know, the STEP grants does say that by June, we'll start writing our RFP. Like we'll have our discussion of what we want our RFP to be, and then send us off to start writing it. So that's what we put into the grant. Obviously that's flexible also because they haven't even given us a final grant yet. So we'll need to work that in. But it is something we're trying to nail down. It's just hard to figure out since, we keep going we think we're done with the language, and then they bring up some little thing to change. So yes, that is the report, though, which is separate but related to the STEP grant, will also be around in the May or June time as well. And then there was one other thing that's related to all this that I was going to mention that would happen in May or June. But I'm not remembering it, but I'll mention it. STEP grant, the report. Yeah, no, I'll mention it if I remember it. But May or June would probably be when these things happen.
Got it. Thank you. And then I guess, just to follow up on that, for one more service area, just to include on our timeline, I guess we discussed the community center before, but also just the broader category of community events, and especially in line with like what we were trying to do with Utopia and what we're talking about with putting forward the reimagining nightlife, arts and cultural stuff. Just somewhere in our budget process, having that as an item as well.
Yeah, so that was supposed to be on the 23rd, and then we didn't do it because.
Oh, okay.
So we're gonna need to find a new time for that one, for community programs, and I also need to find the time to like get that set up to be discussed. So, but yes, and we maybe want to go have it at finance committee first before the board, potentially, since it's a big area. It's the biggest area of spending for us. So.
Sure.
Yeah. But yeah,
cool.
That's the thing to do.
Jonathan, anything else for this first item?
No.
Okay. So we can move on to the estimated actuals.
All right, my bad. I clicked end screen share on accident. Great. Well, this is not new information because we reviewed it at our retreat. So the estimated actuals for June 30, I don't think they're going to change much than how we predicted them a month ago, 2 months ago. I did I went and did a check on Fin, and things are pretty much still on track, and we haven't made any major decisions for spending. The door hangers are a cost, but they're not a huge cost that we're going to spend. So it will affect the calculation a bit because of things like that. But it's overall, this net of 732 is still the estimated actual for June 30 on our balance, our fund balance. And yeah, for most of these, one thing I will note, I actually even made this notation here, is this is why I said let's move the final budget to August too. So Ivy Beautiful, we did under budget it because we put 70,000 even though our contract was for 82,000. So that's going to be like technically over, but that's because we approved our budget like 2-3 months before we approved that contract. And I noticed that they are not over budget as of right now, but if they continue their monthly rate, they will go over budget. But we had that discussion today on, hey, we've noticed this, and we're still 50% of the contract, and not even 50% spent yet, but that's because it had a slower start. So we're gonna manage that. So that estimated actual is gonna be 85, but that is within what our contract was for 83. So it's not going to be a big difference from what we did sign up for. Besides that, the safety stations, I think my prediction is gonna be 30,000. They've been spending that down, and this is a weird 122,000 was because this is just how it's noted on Fin. We had last year unspent, and we accrued more than we spent, and then so there was like a credit in the account. So we are going to spend like the 152, but it's going to say we spent 122. That was just I didn't translate that. But yeah, oh, actually I had estimated we'd spend 25 on the community festival, so that'll go down. So yeah, I mean, I think our estimated actuals are about correct. And so these are accurate representations of what our different costs are for our programs. And then 732 is, I'm confident it's going to be around there what our end year fund balance is. So that's our
Hey, Jonathan, just a question on contracts for the two we are talking about, Ivy Beautiful. Was Emily Allen our contact before? I mean, was she the one in charge of our contract? And then she's gone, right?
Yeah, so now I'm working with Eddie Taylor. So there was that hiccup too, where I was working with Emily and then she left, and then now I'm working with Eddie to catch him up.
And Eddie Taylor is the director?
He's the executive director of the entire organization. Yeah.
Okay. And then the same thing on the we had some trouble getting some bills for the I don't know if it was the interpersonal violence investigator or they switched her around during COVID.
Yeah.
And then I'm not sure the community policing, but with the retirement of Dave, do we think we'll have a good contact to keep those services going and get them billed timely?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. At least with the safety stations, we should be good because Pam Gephardt, who's the administrative head of the program, who's not a police officer, she's still there and she handles the CSO scheduling and billing. So at least on a basic level, that is not interrupted, in terms of just the relationship and the contract and the service. We're going to have to rebuild that with the new person. The investigator, on the other hand, it's gone back and forth on who we've dealt with, but it's been pretty good this year so far. We've gotten the 2 bills for the 2 quarters of this year. So,
okay.
And the one for now is due in a couple days. I assume we'll get it. So,
okay. All right.
Yeah, it's a challenge there. That's a hidden cost, is all the relationship building we have to
right.
redo.
And Jonathan, looking at the public safety budget portion you have up right now, since we reappropriated the funding for the social media intern to community programs part of our budget, is that something that should be reflected in this adjusted budget going forward?
It already is.
Okay, so like where you just had public safety, it's still there. I guess I'm wondering if it's still supposed to be in that part of the budget.
Well, it got zeroed. It's 0 now. So that is 0, and then this is now 60,000.
Sorry, I'm looking at the 12,000.
Oh, I thought we didn't eliminate this. I thought our resolution was for the community policing 30,000.
Okay,
Yeah.
Got it.
So this 12,000 can, if we didn't want it, it can just not be added in again when we do the 21-22 budget.
Got it.
Yeah, that's another interesting change because we now have a staffing change at the sheriff's department too. So while we were working with Justin on this piece, I just wonder how they switch chairs at the top of the IV foot patrol all the time, and then you go, are you going backwards or forwards? I don't know which way we're going. I mean, and they do that for promotional purposes in the sheriff's department to give them experience out in IV, which isn't bad. Just not sure what the philosophy of the new guy is.
Right.
This is just a minor thing, but can you go back up to staff salaries? Okay, let me try and see what I'm looking at here. For a couple of line items, for FICA Medicare, unemployment insurance, workers' comp, since we have lower staff salaries, should we have lower costs there reflected since that's tied to payroll?
No, these are just tied. These numbers are just for me and Deborah and our interns.
Okay,
Normal numbers. We made the decision to put all that, for the community center people, that's here.
got it. Okay, makes sense to me.
And these are just copy pasted. I mean, these might not, I really just said, okay, we're going to spend the full salary amount and it's going to be this full FICA. It's always off by a little bit, but that's just how I do these because it's less work and it's pretty accurate.
Right. So for the extra help, that's the interns, right?
Yeah. And we didn't have them the whole year this time.
Right. And that does not include Compost Collective. Their staff is under the Compost Collective line item. Okay, good. I see it.
So when Peter Neuschel makes a PRA request of the Compost Collective budget, I just send him this because that's what it is.
All right, excellent. And I guess another related question on just Compost Collective stuff in general. So I know that we got the grant from Associated Students last year, which was, I think, like $36,000. And obviously we've invested some into the program as well, or I guess will by the time that the year is over, most likely, because I'm assuming we'll be a little bit over budget on that. Or maybe not. I'm looking at the estimated actual at 33,000.
No, so that's not how it's going to work, actually. So the grant ended, the grant ended maybe today or last week, because it's the end of spring or end of winter quarter, whenever you measure that. So we got a new grant though for this spring quarter moving forward. So the grants are measured by that, not by any other dates. But how do I explain this? So we got $43,000, and we spent a portion last spring, and then I think it was the remaining was this 39,000 was what we had left to go from July through March. And so we did spend, we got to almost 30, I think, maybe, or to 28 as of the last payroll rerun. So then what I'm going to do is I will give back the money to AS that is, 38 minus 28. So I'll give them back $10,000 per the grant terms. And then we got another grant from the same group for spring, so starting today, I guess, and summer. And then we got another grant from another AS organization for fall. But then beyond fall, we don't have grant funding anymore.
Okay. And what are the organizations?
IVCRC and IVTU. And
Okay.
we got smaller amounts from others, but it's like in the hundreds for equipment and stuff. It's not a lot.
Got it.
So the reason is because there are why should we fund a government organization that can have tax revenue?
Got it. Okay.
And just to clarify on that, Jonathan, is those grants that are coming in, are they split over this fiscal year and next fiscal year, or are they specific to this fiscal year?
The new ones are mainly for next, but one part of this year, or the IVCRC one is spring 21 and summer 21, and then the IVTU one is fall 21.
Got it. Okay.
That way, it's actually not restricted, but.
Got it. Because I know, Bob, in the past, you've made the good point about us building this in, given that it's one of our most popular services. And I guess we're lucky this year with the grant funding to help soften that a little bit, but still planning for how we can build it in going forward.
Well, so eventually, we're going to get the full cost of this program, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
And the built out cost, is it like 50,000 or 55,000 or?
I mean, it depends on how you want to build it out. If you build it out with only college students running it entirely, it'll stay about the same cost, 40 to 50. But to not have that be the management structure, then it'll be a little more than that. And by a little bit, I don't mean that little. It'd be a part-time staff person more.
Yeah, well, I think it's a great job for people that are college students that want to be in the environment and learn this business. So I don't know if I'd ever think, well, we should have permanent staff that do this for the rest of, in permanent part-time positions. I just think it's great student work, and people feel good about what they're doing and they like the work. It's kind of cool to say, hey, that's, you can put that on your resume and, it works.
Oh yeah, no, it's
Totally.
really good. It just consumes like a massive amounts of management time. Like,
Oh, massive amount of man. Oh yeah, I get that part too. Yeah,
some
that's
weeks I can spend like 10, 15 hours on just their problems, and nothing else can get done.
oh, so you're right. So that's easier said than done. So maybe eventually we do have somebody that is part-time permanent that helps run the students.
We've helped, yes. I mean, I would imagine there'd still be students involved a lot in it, but yeah, because even today we had our meeting with our team, and it was really good. And they're all now been in their jobs for a year, but they're not going to be in their jobs anymore, and we all have to start from scratch again, too. So the whiplash is a problem. So there's ways to
Gotcha.
to fix that problem, not in an expensive way. Like, I don't think it needs to be like a full-time person, no way. And then we might have an assistant general manager in this area of community programs. Maybe they could provide support. So, but the basic thing is that this program cost is not the full cost, and yeah, we won't have grants anymore. And we'll need to keep working, which we are doing, but we need to keep working to make sure that we're spending money and benefiting a lot of enough people. And that how we measure that is not the discussion for finance committee, but
Right.
that is a thing, is that we want to be able to have an impact with our dollars. So, but they'll have a good annual report on that though on the 13th. So
Great. Yeah. Well, I love the program too. And I think the goals that we talked about, professional development for young people, but also trying to figure out a way to not take up so much of you guys' time on like minor operational issues. I think there's a solution there. And yeah, maybe it is a part-time person. But that's good to hear. They'll have a report.
yeah. Community garden, that's a consistent thing. Survivor Center, nothing expands since it's COVID. Room is closed. Special projects, that was just to remind you, our Halloween festival.
I did have one question. Line 7508, rents, leases. What can you remind me what that is?
It's our rent upstairs.
Rent upstairs. Okay.
Suite 201. So we're paying rent instead of all these other costs. It is cheaper. I am annoyed we had to pay rent at some point while we were renegotiating, but it is cheaper. Just pay rent right now.
And as a reminder, when does the term for that lease end?
July.
July. Okay.
Anything else on this part of the agenda, Jonathan?
No.
Cool. Okay. Well, that was helpful to see. Thank you for that. Next, we have our initial priorities discussion.
Yeah, so, looking at what we have spent and how we have gone about putting our budget together and our priorities, we've done that in a way that aligns with our goals, but I think we can make that even more formal, or not super formal, but we can at least have the discussion in a formal way where we at least talk about these are the goals we set and how are we financing these goals to happen through our budget. So yeah, I mean, this is more of a discussion for you all. I can scroll towards different goals, but yeah, up to you all what you want to discuss as your initial priorities, especially the new goals that aren't funded necessarily. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess to start off, I think some of what we were discussing before, as far as things that need more work, a lot of those are our new goals, especially on the community center and community programs side. I think that's clear that that's something that we need to explore more when we figure out what our relationship and agreements with other entities ends up being. So I think there's more that we need to know there, but that's definitely a priority of this committee. Additionally, the planning part that we started to discuss before, I think that's going to be something that looks a lot different in this year's budget than in budgets past. I think that with Ivy Beautiful, there may be additional things we look at, especially in regard to carrying out our goal about assisting with the homelessness situation in the aftermath of COVID. So perhaps there's some more work that we have to do there in this year's budget, including not just the equipment and awareness expenses that we discussed at our last meeting, but perhaps opportunities to grow the program to reach more participants. But those are just a few to start off that I have for goals for this year's budget process. And again, those are mostly just things that I see as different from our ongoing budget from last year. Spencer, Bob, priorities?
Well, the first two we talked about, that our number one goal of get the community center and, the buildings under our thing, and then the planning process. The one interesting thing, as Spencer and I are back looking at the dissolution of the redevelopment agency and how all the programs that were related to that got scattered throughout the county. The difficult thing of dealing with the county is it's scattered, and it's hard to know who we talk to that's in a great position of authority that can help us get to the end game. It's just like on our last meeting with General Services, they just pushed the ball right back onto our court, where we have to go out and do a whole bunch of research because they're asking us, well, what do you want? And you just go, well, where is this partnership of us making these buildings together for where the board already made a decision? We're going to keep these buildings for government use. We're going to keep them in the community. But then they never really realized that the buildings that they said we're going to do that with were in such poor condition. And we knew that at the redevelopment agency, because we at the redevelopment agency bought those, and we classified them in the very last thing, 1112, is we bought those properties where we called it, I forgot in the plan, for resale. And we didn't mean to resell them. We meant to, use them maybe differently. And then when the redevelopment agency happened, we had to pivot and say, hey, we're going to use these for government use. And, the county took on the burden of these two buildings to use them for government use. And, they don't have the money to go run a community center, nor do I think it's the right place for it. We're the right place to run a community center, and we're the right place to run that other building. But there still needs to be some big capital improvements to those two buildings for us to take them on, because if we took those on in the current condition, all we need is a couple of lawsuits and we're sunk. It just rip our heart out. And so I don't know how we get, and the same thing goes with the planning thing. I'm back looking at the planning department, and Spence points out to me, at the end of the redevelopment agency, they took the successor agency and put it under planning and development. Well, they put it under planning and development because the biggest thing left to do there, which was not done, is to complete the community plan. But then that just somehow blew up on the way to the, in 2016, that the board dropped it. And I don't know what the real reason is that the board didn't adopt that community plan, but I'll go back. The planning department said in our public meeting, they only spent $1 million. Well, I already looked back in the document, and I know the redevelopment agency, spent 2.3 million. And I can show it right in the agency's financial statements. It's in there. And so, planning might have spent another $1 million in general fund money, but that's my comment about the county is there's nobody, and I've seen this over the years, there's nobody really other than Joan and Gina that help us focus services on IV. IV's just, when the pressure comes and the board says to do something, the board collectively says to do something, then the county acts. But in the meantime, they don't act, in my opinion. There's just too much competition for all the county dollars that, IV eventually gets its fair some of its share, but it's not easy for us to negotiate or to say, how do we get from point A to point B? How do they get on to saying, we support your board goals? That's what we need them to say, and say they're going to help us, accomplish our board goal 1. And so I don't know, I've been around the county too long, and I just get a little frustrated with, even I don't quite know where to go. I mean, I could go complain to Mona, or I could go complain to, I don't even know half the people in the CEO's office. And we could work some of the other board members, and maybe that's where we have to go. I don't know. But it'd be nice to just have an open discussion about what the real, what are we going to do in planning and development? I mean, by them in planning and development come and doing a presentation that we'll get started again in 2 years, you go, well, I didn't see any action or anything that says, yeah, we're really going to get going again in 2 years. So I don't know. I'm struggling with those two.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me add a couple things to that, because obviously I agree with what you're saying, Bob, in broad strokes. We've been working on this together for, over a year and a half now, but now more intensely over the last couple months. So a couple things are just looking at our budget, and what we did last year. Obviously, we didn't, we did at the time know that COVID was the thing, but, we had the $100,000 in the budget for, long-term sort of more high-profile capital maintenance to the buildings. And I think that's good. And, although we're still working through this process, I think we should continue to have that. But your point that from what our building report showed us, that there need to be very significant improvements to the buildings is really true. And I don't know if we're necessarily well suited to make all of those improvements. But I will say this, one thing that I think is going to be an important decision for us, and I think our board should talk about, is as we continue to accumulate, we had another year where we, because of COVID-19 primarily, brought in more revenue, and many of our programs came in under budget or had modifications to them. And so our fund balance is growing. And I do think that it'll be important for us to start talking about how we designate that towards something. And, maybe some of it goes to community facilities, towards those things that have been identified in, the planning process for the community center in the past, such as flooring, things to help make that space usable. That's definitely my first priority. And, the bigger structural things, I do think that's something that the county is going to have to take on. And, we're going to continue working with them on that. I will say in this process, one of the things we found is that the county general fund's taken in more than 8.2 million additional dollars that otherwise would have been going to Isla Vista since the dissolution of the redevelopment agency in 2011. So just in 10 years time, it's a really significant amount of money. And, I just think, we'll continue to figure out exactly how those investments can best be made. But I definitely think, and, just thinking about other projects that our board has identified, board goals wise, investment in infrastructure in Isla Vista, investing in new and innovative types of lighting in Isla Vista. I'm wondering if we can open a dialogue with Public Works and see where there are ways that we can, strategically increase some of their efforts out here. My understanding is it's kind of been on hold since they're renegotiating with UCSB for capital improvements money. And I don't want to do anything that would, supplant the services that they need to provide. But if there are things that we can do that are infrastructure related, that we can put, money in the budget for, I think that would be good. But just really looking at that fund balance, and also wanting to be cognizant that the longer that, we have a balance like that, the more that people in the public are gonna look at that and say, that money, what's that money for? Like, let's commit it to something. So
I think those are all great points. If we have any other community center stuff, let's discuss that now. And then I have some stuff on the public safety side. Did either of you have any more community center stuff?
I just would get your guys' opinion of what you guys think, because you're out there a lot. Is the community center in its current state, like we were going to do before? We hired staff and we thought we could open that up. Do we really think that we can run a great community center in the condition it's in? Or will we never be successful if we don't get another, $1 million worth of improvements before we open it up? And, I'm thinking about shade structures and, flooring and baseboards and acoustics and maybe a stage and, maybe some, I always thought that it'd be kind of cool to cover that air conditioning stuff up with some shade structure up there, like, like they have at the APCD building. On the outside, maybe put some, trellises that go up with some plants to make it environmentally friendly, do some artwork on the building. I was thinking the other day, I said, would anybody ever rent that place for, a wedding? And I go, nah, they wouldn't do that. Then I thought about myself, that my wife and I got married at the courthouse, and we had our reception out on Coal Oil Point at UCSB in a building out there. And it was the coolest reception ever. And we were just a bunch of young people. And that's where we hung out. We kind of hung out around that area and said, oh, that'd be a cool place to go have it. And you realize how beautiful it was. We had some pretty high flyers come to our wedding that from Lori's side of the family, and they got a kick out of it. And so I said to myself, well, I could see people going down to the beach in Isla Vista, getting married on the beach, and coming back there for a reception. But you sure have to make it, you know, a decent structure to be attractive. I don't know. I just don't know how to get it. I've been tooling around my brain and say, well, you could easily eat on a government bid contract to improve that. It could cost you $1 million because, you know, you got to go out to bid. You got to do all that kind of stuff, and it gets expensive really fast. We'd probably have to have general services run the project, and they're fairly slow and expensive. I mean, it took them 5 years or 4 years to do the original work on the community center. So anyways, I just don't know what you guys think about it. I've been thinking about the other building in the community room too, and saying, I've been kind of getting worried to say, because we sat in that room for a long time, and we know because the sheriff came in and said, you know, and that guy finally, when we did the report, and he said, those glass storefronts are to do retail displays out of. They're not to hold Zumba classes in there and somebody goes through the window, or we put a bunch of young kids in there and one of the kids goes through the window, you know, going for library services. I just started thinking about that and go, that's just not in the condition that it's ready for a government building, which, you know, the reason they have all these ADA requirements is you put in a government building and you're going to have the public going in there. You got to make them safe. And so anyways, I don't know what you guys think. If we, you know, sometimes I go, well, we're going to run those buildings like IV and people accept the warts and, you know, not having building and safety in there to say, you got to fix this stuff. And I don't know. I just think, I think you could spend $1 million on each of those buildings, the surrounding landscape, sidewalks and all that to make them right. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I've been kicking around in my brain to say, well, maybe we do need to go borrow $2 million and, you know, get the county to help us somehow pay the debt.
Yeah, so you bring up a lot of really good points. And for your initial question, at first, I was the question about if it's ready for use, if it's ready for people to enjoy it. I'm kind of torn because I've been attending meetings about opening the community center for 6 years. And we thought this was going to happen 4 years ago. Right. And so that's where I feel a lot of pull to get a launch open as soon as possible. And I think about events like the one that happened shortly before COVID, where we had live music. I think it was a salsa type band, and there were a lot of people, and there was dancing, and there was a cool music setup and a light show, and it was a really nice environment. I think about like Zumba in there, and like, yes, it's probably ready for exercise classes. But then I think about like what you mentioned with a wedding or some other type of use that's beneficial for the community, because there could be some rental during a time that the community is not using it to help pay for programs for the community. And when it gets to that level, I don't think it's at prime time. So I feel kind of torn there, because I do see the need for us to get this space up and running as soon as possible. But I know that doing that is just deferring the work that needs to be done to take it to the next level. So if we were to go in a direction where we're focusing more on the capital side, I think that would tell us that we need to just really expand our pop-up community programs in the meantime. But still, I'm torn. I think this is something we'll have to talk to the community about. Spencer?
I think that you put it really well. I'm torn as well. And, you know, when you talk about going to meetings about opening the community center for 6 years, I really empathize with that. And I also recognize that, there were some pretty significant work products that came out of that meetings that had sort of a roadmap for the community. Number one, there was obviously the engineering and architecture renderings that went into that were the literal blueprints for improving that building. And, the county was never able to fully pull that off. And, we've worked to try and get, additional grant revenue, which we recently got denied for, unfortunately, for part of that space. And the one thing that I keep coming back to, because I remember at that event, Ethan, and it was such a great thing with the live music, with the dancing. But looking back on it too, I do wonder if it was safe, because I don't think those floors are suitable in their current state for us to open shop and start having sort of the recreational programming that I think the community has really shown that they want out of those spaces, because a concrete floor is just not necessarily suitable for that. So I'm torn as well. But I think that goes without saying, doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of the many significant improvements that need to be made to the clinic building in order for it to just not continue to deteriorate, which is, I think I heard this in what Bob is saying. I think we're starting to think about that, and about whether or not it is necessarily a good idea to be thinking of the two as a package, or whether it's better to think about these things individually.
Good points. Jonathan, Deborah, do you have any thoughts you want to share on this?
Yeah, I think you have a minimum viable product, but it's not much else. And the amount of money it'll take to make it better is massive. And that's just like the nice stuff to make it better, not counting the necessary stuff. So it's a huge, I don't know if we have the money to do all that, or if our money can be used differently to use it. Look, you could use a building for a year and probably be fine. 5 years it's not, I don't know, that's not going to be a quality thing to keep doing the same thing for 5 years at that building. So
yeah, the other person that got me thinking about, the use of the buildings and stuff was Marcos, who said, hey, it'd be nice to have a place where we can go, where the community can go feel free to hang out, I said, oh yeah, we probably should put a deck on top of that building, and then people can go hang out there all day, but that's what the community does want to have a place to hang out. And we should make it so that it's not a typical, some people think it's okay to just keep putting people in poor buildings in IB, and I'm torn too. Then don't get me wrong, I'm torn about this, because I would like to see that open, and if we didn't have the thing come on with COVID and the homeless, I would have said it would be open, and we would have made maybe some of those mistakes about putting government programs into buildings that could open us up to some type of lawsuits if somebody gets hurt. So
one last thing just on improvements to the community center is that the improvements that I'm thinking about, obviously there's the floor and the baseboards and some things that are interior to the building that definitely need to happen before it is open for programming. But some of the things that are exterior, such as the stage structure and the outdoor courtyard, those improvements can be happening concurrently with programming going on. So that's another thing to think about too. It's not necessarily an either or, I think, from that aspect. But I'll also just say, because that it's also good to think, maybe long term, both of those buildings don't have the shelf life to be able to last into the next century. But the community also, I think, is really demanding that we do something now. This is one of our board goals, is to get a community center reopened and established in the community during this next fiscal year. And I think it'll be a really important time too. I mean, so social life in Isla Vista has just been so different and so fragmented since the onset of the pandemic, and with social distancing and everything. We'll have a huge opportunity to make a difference if we can try and step in and fill that void once things start to reopen with some programming. So that's another thing to be thinking about too.
Totally. I want
Yeah, my last
go ahead, Bob.
just on the funding side, I was always hoping that we'd use our capital reserves and stuff as match money, either matches for the county like we did on the last grant. They were going to put in 200, we're going to put in 50. I go, oh yeah, that's what we want to do with that. But I'm also saying, if we want to take, if we're not going to be successful in those sources, or it might take years, I'm ready to take our capital money and invest it in the building, like into the flooring and the baseboards, and say, we'll make this work, but where I get worried is I bitched for about 5 months or 6 months for them to replace the emergency exit on there, and they finally did it. But it's not the kind of emergency exit I'd want. I'd want 2 windows there so you can look out and say what's behind the closed door. Anyways, that's just another thought. But I'm ready. I'm ready to if we can talk to the county and the county says, we're not giving you another dime, we'll give you the buildings in the condition they're in, then we just have to be realistic about how long can we generate capital money before our annual operations eat up our whole stream. And eventually that's what's going to happen, because we're providing services. So it's a luxury to get this capital money, but it is hard to generate that. The only other way to generate that is to lock it into the budget by borrowing money. And you could take, that's kind of what spurred me on about asking the county for a property tax shift. But anyways, I'm ready either way. I'm still there, ready to support with our own reserves and at least get the community center open.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we have consensus about that. We'll have to figure out which direction it takes to get to that point. But
yeah, and on the other building, there is a lease stream that it could take care of that building. It's just we as a organization have to be committed to say we're going to take the surplus and plow it back into the buildings on a consistent basis. And I don't think that that's what the county's doing. I think they're pulling that lease revenue into general services budget, and it's not all coming back to IB.
I want to pass it over to Mark. Mark, I know you went in the chat, but if you'd like to speak on community facilities budget at all, feel free.
Hi, Ethan, and hi, everyone. I came in a little late, so I feel like I missed a good portion of the discussion. But like what I mentioned in the chat is, and I don't know why it took me so long to realize this, is there's just this total lack of like public seating, just the ability to sit down in a comfortable way in Isla Vista. And I really noticed that when we have our the residents of Friendship Manor are walking through with their wheelchairs and their walkers through Isla Vista, and there's no like really like that. There's not all in all that many benches throughout IV for them to take seats and rest, honestly. And I also feel that for really like the center of Isla Vista, even though it is, largely the commercial area, most of the public seating is, near businesses, like immediately near businesses for those businesses, which is fair. And I think having a space where people can, like, I know it's called the community room, but literally communing with one another outside of spending money or outside of partying, you know, at a person's house. Like that's kind of like, I guess, my whole, you know, vision for the community center, and yeah, and I hope it could like supplement that need, which I ultimately think is a Rec and Parks failure. I just hope the community center could help with that. That's it for me.
Got it. Thank you, Mark. Do we have any more that we want to cover on community center now before moving on to other parts of the priorities? All good? Okay. On the public safety side, I do have some things I would like to discuss there. Jonathan, I know that our interns and staff, and along with the board, everyone's really interested in how do we develop alternative response to the issues we face in Isla Vista, which are traditionally handled by sworn police officers. And I think back to our AB3 process, where we were really paying close attention to the idea of the Student Neighborhood Assistance Program. And we took our step towards that with our initial IV safety stations. First time that student workers of the police department were in IV specifically located, not just coming in and out for escort calls. And I think that was a good first step, but we're now at a point where we want to see how we can expand that, where we have community members, whether they're college-aged students or other folks who are helping with non-sworn response to especially quality of life issues. So maybe this looks like the Student Neighborhood Assistance Program at Cal Poly SLO, or the one that was piloted on the Mesa near Santa Barbara City College. Maybe it's something else, but I guess this is a question for Jonathan, and then also Spencer and Bob, if you guys are into this. But with the work that's going on or about to begin with the interns, do you think that we should be budgeting for any sort of program development on this front for this next fiscal year?
We definitely can. I mean, you'll get the intern presentation in a couple weeks, so we'll know more if that's something we want to do. It's possible.
Got it. Spencer, Bob, do you guys have anything on that?
Well, I'll just add that I agree that if I think where I'm at with looking at our public safety programs is, especially looking at the CSO safety station, is they do a really great job at accomplishing the goals of the program. And I'm wondering how we can take that, I think, to the next level. So I don't know if it's program development funding. I don't know if it is trying to work with our partners at UCPD to try and gather support for some sort of a SNAP type program. But I completely agree that we need to do more to invest in something like that.
Totally. Bob, any thoughts on this item?
I don't have any at the moment.
For sure. And also one thing I'm thinking about is this may be, I mean, it's good that we're being very thoughtful before putting together a proposal and before going to say UCPD. But we may find that this is something that is just kind of a logical step on their side too, in our work together, because we've had a couple of years now of providing the safety stations and the interpersonal violence investigator position, and we've really come into a good groove in our working relationship, and it's clear what the community wants. So with our existing provider, we may be in a good position to do a pilot program on that front. So I'm sure we can talk about that when it comes before our board. One other thing that's kind of related to expanding or adjusting the budget for the safety station program. I know for a couple years now, I've been interested in how do we expand locations during normal times. Obviously during COVID, we're fine with one and sometimes two locations, which currently we have the Little Acorn Park location and Window to the Sea Park or Sea Lookout. I get those two confused. I think Window to the Sea. But with that in mind, there are areas where we could also really benefit from having a safety presence, a non-sworn, unarmed safety presence, whether that's closer to Abrego and Picasso roads on weekend nights, whether that is somewhere in the middle, like say Trigo Pasado Split, but other areas where a lot of foot traffic goes through, but we don't have the presence right now. One thing that I've discussed with Spencer before is that, I love the CSOs and I'm very happy with the safety stations, but as we expand, perhaps we find that not every safety station needs to be CSO based. We may find that some parts of the community could really just benefit from having some friendly faces who are there to hand out water and give people directions and help someone call a cab or other types of neighborhood assistance that's not directly related to, say, UCPD. Again, that was just like one idea I had for if we are expanding the safety station, maybe we don't need CSOs at every location. But again, that's just a preliminary thought, but perhaps that's something that we do consider if we were to move forward with some sort of expansion.
That's a good idea, Ethan.
Thank you.
I agree. And I think it'll be, just in thinking about how the two sort of the potential program of doing something SNAP related and CSOs, how do they interact with each other? Just thinking, maybe the SNAP offices are a different type of position than a CSO, and maybe not all of them are necessarily students or something like that. Maybe they're young people who live in the community. And so maybe there still is a need for CSOs. I definitely see that, and with the future of that program being a lot incumbent, I think, on progress we're able to make on that third front. But I like the idea too, if it makes sense for us to utilize more of our other partners that have been out in the field, already, and we have had some successful partnerships with student groups passing out water and masks and things like that. So
cool. Do you guys have anything else on public safety or any public comment on the public safety item?
Ethan and Spencer, well, for you guys, isn't there some discussion about having some kind of ambassador program people keep talking about? Is that related to public safety?
Bob, I think the ambassadors are a county program that primarily works with small businesses and help them navigate the different requirements needed to reopen safely. And they have been out in Isla Vista, even I think at the beginning of this year. But I think that although there have been some ideas in the community that I think are interesting ideas about trying to have some of the COVID restrictions, maybe there's a position that is separate from a police officer and is more ambassador-like, that's able to make that first contact when people are not complying. It has not materialized, and now I don't know of anything that's in the works like that.
That's cool.
One more thing on public safety on our the interpersonal violence investigator is just that I know we had the question last year about the investigators' time, especially when all agencies were kind of scrambling at the beginning of COVID and we weren't sure, there's a question of reassignment. And so I know that's going to come up for our board when we review the program. But I'm just really thinking about that and making sure that the money that we're budgeting for that is money that's getting spent in Isla Vista And, maybe the way that we can invest public confidence in that is, in the future going forward, having, some metrics where they can really report sort of the time cards or how that time is being spent, just so we can be confident in that. And especially with all the turnover that's going on, I know things, whenever there's turnover, things change a little bit. So I just think it'll be good for us to reiterate that as a board, because that's really a big priority of mine.
Great points. To you guys, so at this point, for like special issues of the budget, we've discussed the community facilities, we've discussed public safety, we discussed planning a little bit. Are there any other priority areas that you want to discuss right now?
I think maybe goal 5 is a good one for us to talk about. Operation ownership of community facilities and development of public infrastructure.
Okay.
So we know we talked about the community center in this aspect, and we can't share everything about what we're speaking with, since it's an ongoing negotiation on building transfer. But the other piece of this is infrastructure. And I know I mentioned earlier the fund balance that we've accumulated, and we've had some good discussions at the board in the past about things such as sidewalk infill projects, as well as creative lighting projects, where we can get the public spaces to be brighter, but maybe we're not utilizing traditional streetlights. Maybe it's not necessary to utilize those. So I'm definitely interested in seeing, us really investigate that, and wanted to see what your thoughts are on infrastructure.
I think that definitely makes sense. I think it ties in well with our STEP grant process, which obviously that would inform spending after this budget cycle. But I think what you're saying totally makes sense, and it ties in well with the next step of UCSB and the county's work. I was really pleased to see recent sidewalk completions going east to west, but I know we still have a lot to see north to south, and lighting continues to be an issue. And I think that creative lighting, as you put it, is something the community really likes.
Just real quick, I'll throw another component of this too, that we had at our recent discussion about the idea of closing Pardal, doing more to establish outdoor seating and sort of like these cafe-like environments. I'm thinking just even as we started to envision that, there were different questions that came up that made us think, oh, so what would we really need to do to make that space really become activated? Are there improvements that we may need to make to this street in order to make that possible? And then the flip side of that we heard from the community, I think, is, we need to have, I think, a sustained engagement process with the community stakeholders that includes business operators in that area too. And so I see that really as tying into that, and think that'd be a really interesting thing for us to invest some time and revenue in.
Hey, I have to step off for an appointment and let you all know I have to go early, but 20 minutes past, so please continue and I'll get the notes.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks,
Great,
Jonathan.
Thanks, Jonathan. Sorry we hold you up so long.
Yeah, I think, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Joan seems to be excited about this idea about, reducing cars and IV and freeing up, parking and, street space to the community. And, I think we're thinking about that, but let's do the STEP grant and see how that goes. It's kind of like another thing. Well, let's do the STEP grant in 2 years. In 2 years, we'll have that conversation. But we're not going to have any planning conversation for 2 years. So you go, well, somebody needs to do or lead that effort. And if it's us, I mean, we have the power of doing a parking district, and maybe we should think about, you know, getting actively involved, of really getting serious on getting rid of cars and IV. I mean, I like the idea. Joan seems really excited to think that that's the future. And you know, pre-COVID, I was kind of moving that way. We were using Uber a lot and getting around with Uber. And you say, well, do you really need 2 cars? Do you need 1 car? You know, I just removed a car off in front of my house that was there since 1994 and said, okay, I don't need that car anymore. It's a liability for me. So it's just like students bringing cars to Isla Vista. You know, as a parent, you think that's a big liability. And, you know, some kind of active thing to not bring cars to IB, and, you know, other than the ones you need to get to work. To me, there should be a program for that.
Yeah, I think that you bring up a lot of good points about the STEP grant. And Ethan, I know you dropped off and didn't get to hear all of it, but I think synopsis of Bob's comment is, you know, I know we're thinking about this as we move forward with the STEP grant. But when I think about this, you know, it is about cars. Obviously, everything is about cars in our society these days, because it's such a primary mode of transportation. But I think the way that I'm viewing this is a little bit more along the lines of business development. Because even if you look at the Pardall corridor right now, even in the past like 6 to 8 months, there have been, you know, 2 pretty large retail food service spaces that have become vacant. The Blaze Pizza space, as well as the Coffee Collab space. And I believe that there is another one in that greater area as well. I think Mark mentioned it the other day too, was mentioning Wanderlust. And I know that I think one of those hair studios moved in. So now there's a vacancy right there too. So there's that business development element of things as well that I'm thinking about. And, you know, even I'm wondering, you know, maybe we're able to do something that is, maybe it doesn't start off as permanent, and we ease into it and do something that is temporary, so that we can demonstrate a proof of concept that this works. But anyways, I bring that up here because I think that is integral to just developing public spaces in IV.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point.
Yeah.
And now's a time where we can pilot things that before we never could. So definitely agree that should be a focus of our finance efforts this year. Mark, go ahead with your comment.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't know like when the public comment is within this sort of.
All good.
Yeah. So like speaking specifically on the idea of Pardall, which I mean, like, you know, I think y'all know me. Like I would love to shut the whole damn thing down, but I was talking to business owners. So specifically, I was talking to Dana, who is the newest and current owner of the Ivy Deli Market. But she also, I guess, is like the rental owner of some of the other properties, including like the bike shop that's just like down the ways that has the connected parking lot. And Dana was like really kind of hesitant of the idea of closing this because of like the way that like there needs to be like, they have like a truck that delivers bikes to that bike shop there, and then they also have Uber and Grubhub that go to her and are a significant source of revenue for her. So those are like some concerns that she has, but like some business owners across the street are totally down for the idea. And so not that this is like a workshopping space, but one of my kind of thoughts is, and I know this is expanding this idea massively, is to make the Embarcadero loop a one-way loop, and then closing one side of the lane for either additional like outdoor seating for like nonstop in those businesses on that side, and or make it like a temporary loading zone for those businesses that would be affected by a Pardall closure. And so it would all in all do kind of the same thing as having a two-way road on the Embarcadero Loop. It would be a little bit more inconvenient for cars, but it might be able to supplement the needs of a business in a certain other way. So just a comment.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks. And I mean, building off of that and what you and Spencer, Bob have both.
Ethan, we lost you. You're on mute.
Yeah.
Thank you. Building off of what Mark, Spencer, and Bob have all said, I think in the past, when we looked at this type of thing, we were just looking in terms of the infrastructure improvement. But here, I mean, it could be operating a community facility if we were maintaining and overseeing whatever the improvements, whether it's seating areas, who knows, lawn style games, entertainment that took place in the right of way. That sounds like also operating the community facility side. So I think it's good that we're exploring that. So Spencer, did you have anything else on the community facilities and development of public infrastructure?
No, I think that's it.
Cool.
Hey,
So
one last thought on Pardal. When the redevelopment agency, I think we've discussed the closure of Pardal, and we even, designed that place to be temporary disclosures. And I know we had electronics out there and you could plug in for bands and stuff. But at one point we discussed, I think there's an alleyway on the mountain side behind those buildings. And I don't know if I think it might not be totally open because we've let maybe some businesses push into the alleyway, but they're, at least for a delivery thing, if you did that a one-way alley, people could come back in there and then maybe they can roll their stuff across the street and stuff. So I haven't been back there. We should all just go look and see if there's an alley. But we also decided to talk a long time about where the amphitheater is get rid of that, move it to the other side of the park, and put an alley on the ocean side too. But that has its own difficulties about using park land. So
yeah, Bob, there is an alley part of Mountainside. I think that the Blaze Pizza spot kind of makes it so that it doesn't fully go all the way through.
That's because somebody's illegally been in the alleyway. I mean, I don't know who let them build it.
So your understanding is that alleyway is public right of way?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's a good thing for us to know.
But maybe somebody screwed up the public right of way a long time ago. I don't know, but I know we had that discussion. So,
do you have any inkling of where I might investigate that?
Probably Public Works.
Okay.
Number one, we should walk and take some pictures and,
Sure.
and ask. It might even be planning and development. So, or zoning or somebody, might be zoning. But anyway, it's just something to investigate or look at. Sorry.
Deborah, what were you saying?
I'm going to say it might be somebody in zoning who could tell us what happened to the alleyway. And
Yeah.
I know that for a period of time, the city of Pasadena had a program where they actually turned their alleyways into gathering areas and dining areas behind the restaurants or extensions to the restaurants. They've named them all, paved them. It's another street.
Oh, for sure. Good to know. Spencer, did you have anything else on that?
No, that's it. Other than I did want to jump back to Mark's comments and say I definitely appreciate that. And that that's, I think, been a big reason why I'm thinking, we start off with something that's temporary, proof of concept. I think that's going to make people a little bit more comfortable with the idea.
Yep. Great point. And that goes in line with a project that you all know I care a lot about right now. So I like that a lot. Okay, so next up we have our community budget priorities survey. Deborah, do you want to tell us a little bit about this?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
You can, sorry.
We can hear you now.
Yes. We had an opportunity to talk about the budget survey today with the interns. And so we're excited about having them do some work on revisiting the budget questions and the focus and its overall, for lack of a better term on my part, approach or tone that we want to put out to get more people to give us a broader a perspective and more input in different areas. So we are going to have them work on this as a project to tweak it really for where we're at in 2021. We are bringing it up for you guys to look at. We want you to look at the survey and to really give us feedback for those areas that you also think we should revise or put greater focus on, or maybe narrow our scope on. One of the things we talked about, of course, was nightlife. So just things like that. We want to know how you guys want us to move forward with the budget. The survey for the budget. And we're hoping that the interns can have something back on it. I want to say we're looking at April 13th and the 27th, because those are our next 2 dates. But yeah, this is our opportunity to redo the survey, get it out there as soon as possible, and we want you guys to look at it in depth.
Cool. So my first thoughts looking at this, well, I think the questions are really thoughtful. Definitely a lot of similarities with what we've sent out in the past. I appreciate how for the first part, the questions are pretty open-ended. People can answer them in many different ways. And the second part too, really narrows down on our existing services, which is great. But I think that the way that this is laid out right now is understandable for community members who don't usually attend our meetings, which is definitely what it needs to be. So I really like what has been drafted.
Yeah, I agree. Looking at it, and Deborah, when did you say you're meeting with the interns who are working on this next?
We actually went over the project or proposed to them a work outline for it today. We're not slated to talk about it until Monday the 5th, but I'll be meeting with them on Friday also.
Very cool. Okay. Well, then with that in mind, I don't know if I have really any specific things that I would necessarily change about the survey. You know, I leave that all up to you. But what I definitely think will be really important is having them really think about the distribution aspect of it, to really try to get as many responses as possible. I know it's just so difficult right now to get people engaged because everything's virtual. And in the past, you know, that we had more tools at our disposal to engage people, but in the virtual space, I think that this is going to be one of the most significant forms of outreach that we're able to do. So, you know, I just hope, you know, just thinking about, and I don't know if there's ways that we can provide incentives, if that's something that's helpful to get people to fill out the survey. Also just thinking about really trying to have organic ways of like distributing it, like really getting it out to all the different listservs that students are on by virtue of being students, through their classes at UCSB and SBCC. I know it's usually pretty easy to ask for something to be forwarded around. Obviously, social media, we do a lot of social media on that end, but I just really think, you know, focus on distribution and how to do it as widely as possible is really going to be key.
I'm glad you said that, Fellows. items that you listed, actually the listserv and being able to reach our community virtually, those are things that we did talk about today with the interns, and they made similar suggestions as yours. So I'm certain that they'll come back with more of that and we can share that with you. Did you, as a matter of fact, Spencer, did you mention to Jonathan that you were hoping we could get in front of some of our classes if that was possible?
I did
No.
not mention that, but I would love to help with that if
Okay.
that's something that you're thinking about.
That's something we talked about with the interns. It's just conversation right now again, but from that, they suggested also the listserv, the social media venues and other mechanisms for distribution. So we will be
Yeah.
getting back to that one.
And I know
Yeah.
it's so tricky because in the past, I mean, whether we're doing stuff on the government side or on the political side, we do class reps where we go and talk to people who are about to start class. But so many classes are asynchronous now that the professor's just saying, oh, hey, watch these videos, they're announcements. And that obviously does not have the same return on investment there. But if there are like Zooms or something that we can go to, like I said, super happy to help with that. Depending on what our responses look like as we started, maybe we've started to do the incentives for testing and we've had some success there. Maybe we think about trying to do incentives for filling out the survey, but depending on how it looks like responses are coming in.
Okay.
Agreed. And I saw a great example of engagement this weekend. Right now, there's a countywide recreation master plan being developed, and I was hiking on the Jesucita Trail, and I stumbled upon this table of folks with the firm soliciting information about the rec master plan, and that was a good example to me of how we can get creative of inserting ourselves into the places that Isla Vista residents like to go, whether that's tabling at a beach access point safely, of course, or setting up at any other community events that might be popping up as it gets safer for people to be out in public. So I'm excited to see what we can do.
Good ideas. We will bring that back to the interns and get them to brainstorm on that.
Cool. Thank you. Does anyone have anything else on this item? Nope. Okay. We have meeting schedule next. We want to select a regular meeting time. So I guess we can decide if we want to meet every other month, if we want to meet monthly. I think in the past what we've done is had meetings spread out a little bit more, and then when it gets closer to budget adoption, we've had a lot of meetings. But what are our preferences, or does staff have a recommendation?
In that last year was super odd, and I can't fall back on Jonathan's memory of what happened prior. I would say, I'm going to have to defer to you guys. I would recommend at least meeting monthly, and as we have a need, as we move through finalizing the project, because we may have to have some special meetings as we get into the survey responses. So I would say we at least schedule our next meeting for a month out and special meeting if we have need.
I think that sounds good. So I guess this is the fifth Monday of the month, so we don't have that for every month. But
wait a minute, I take that back, Ethan. April 13th is our next board meeting.
Okay.
So if there are items that you want to make sure we get before the board, let's schedule something prior to that.
Sure. I think that I don't think we have to meet before the next board meeting as this committee. I think we'll be able to report back to the board about our preliminary discussions. I'm just going to double check on the timeline document to see if there's anything that we're missing. Yeah, my thought is that you and Jonathan can report back to the board on any developments between now and the 13th board meeting. But maybe if we want to have our next finance committee meeting on the last Monday of April.
Yeah.
So does that make more sense, last Monday or third Monday, since that's the Monday in between the two board meetings?
Third Monday, that sounds good. So do we want to have a motion to set the regular meeting time as the third Monday of the month at 5:30?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Perfect. Any comments? We're good, Mark? Cool. All right. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Cool. All right. That passes. Thank you. And then we have one more, or actually, no, that's the close of our agenda.
That's it.
Cool. Well, we did a good job tonight. I know it can be intimidating to open this up after a year, but it's very much in line with everything else we've been doing. So thanks, everyone. Thank you, Deborah, for sticking with us tonight. And do we have a motion to it? Thank you. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Just a point of clarification, same time, 5:30 are the meeting times? Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
And guys, we'll use this Zoom as a reoccurring.
Fantastic. Sounds good. All right.
Got
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Cool. Motion passes. Thank you all. See you soon.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everything. Mark,
Hey,
thanks
Bob.
for attending
Thanks,
too.
guys.
Hey, Bob, quick thing. Check your email
Okay.
from earlier today. We can talk about it later.
Hold on one second.
Okay. See you soon. Be well.
Bye.
Thanks, Ethan.
All right. I'm going to hop off.